Hi, my name is Elle Billing. I am a chronically ill queer femme, and I'm tired. I'm here this episode and every episode to dig at the roots of our collective fatigue, explore ways to direct our care in compassionate and sustainable ways, and harness creative expression to heal ourselves and our world. And welcome to HORF, Radical Care in a Late Capitalist Hexscape. My guest for this episode is Austin Foudy. Austin Foudy is an emerging artist and longtime Boise resident. Working in acrylic-based mixed medium, he enjoys exploring the mystery of textures, shades, and depth. With a degree in English literature, he enjoys the potential for the open interpretation of narrative through his abstract creations, in contrast to more familiar, direct literary content. Austin cares deeply about supporting local artists of all forms in the burgeoning Treasure Valley scene, anticipating with enthusiasm the growth and potential of Boise in this vein. I'm really excited to have Austin on the podcast today as a fellow artist, as somebody who used to live in Idaho, and I'm just really thrilled to be able to interview another emerging artist. Well, hello, Austin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you.
It's nice to have you on HORF. I have to admit, I didn't tell you this in the email, and I don't usually spring things on guests, but like you've been on my list of people to contact like since November. But like I was just chickening out. It's easier for me to ask people that I know and like have more rapport with.
Sure. Yeah.
But like when you started painting, I was really excited about. I'm excited when people start painting. Like, oh, look, someone found art. And then I just really enjoyed watching you grow as a painter, and I was like, oh, I should get him on the podcast. Oh, but like I'd never met him in person. Like I don't really know him. I'm just a creeper on his Instagram.
Instagram, yeah.
And then I was like, oh, fine, I'll reach out. I'll do it. He's doing great. That is all that to say, I'm very excited to have you here.
I appreciate it. Thanks for asking me. And yeah.
Sorry if that was weird. I've been weird the whole time we've been talking, so that's just how it goes. So
No, I'll definitely reciprocate in the weirdness for sure. So let's
yeah, reciprocal weirdness is going to be the name of my other band. We were talking
Perfect.
before, and a cool band name came up, but now reciprocal weirdness is going to be my other band name. Anytime a cool phrase comes up, those are going to be my bands.
I love it.
And of course, we can edit all this out. It'll be fine.
Right.
We're not live.
Or are we?
No. I like being able to edit where I screw up. I don't like to be wrong in public. It's a thing I'm working on. I think it's going better now. Like our little dots are staying green.
That's my kink. I love being wrong in public.
Oh, well, that's an interesting. I would say tell me more about that, but I don't know if we have time to get into that. And I don't think it's that kind of podcast.
No, I don't think so either.
I have a friend who has that kind of podcast. Okay, so how have you received? This is a care focused and a creativity focused podcast. And I always ask my guests, how have you received care this week?
Yeah, I love that question. This week I have really focused on self-care, and so providing care and love and space for myself this week.
Great.
I'm a habitual overgiver under like self-nurturer.
Mm-hmm.
And over the past months, I went through a pretty stressful, traumatic breakup, and it's been a year, to put it lightly.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been taking time to focus more on really moving forward throughout my days with intention and a direction that's going to serve me best, both in my space and in my mental well-being. As somebody who suffers from clinical depression, I have to listen to those things pretty acutely, and frequently I don't. And that's when I find myself in those troughs of despair and trouble.
I definitely resonate with that. I have depressive disorder and chronic illness, and so I definitely understand needing to like move with intention.
Yeah.
And to keep myself out of those troughs. And when I find myself in them, being able to say, okay, I know where I am. I know I'm not going to stay here. this is what I need to do to like feel this and then move through it.
Definitely.
And and it was like an intentional choice to have to be able to like move through things that way, because before, when I was like overtired and overstressed and overworked, like there wasn't space to actually have those kind of intentional thoughts about providing care for myself
Hmm.
and choosing how to process my feelings.
Absolutely. And it's so insidious how that those little subconscious narratives can creep in, like, the tendrils of little vines, and sort of infect your psyche in ways that you don't anticipate if you don't move forward with intention. And I've caught myself in quite a few of those troughs lately. So eating well, I've been going to the gym a little bit, taking time to create, to paint, to read,
Hmm.
spend time with my dogs, and it's finally, mid spring here in Idaho, and
Hmm.
so now there's sunshine and yard work and gardening and whatnot that I can pour myself into, and I really trying to take care of myself in the space that I have.
That's good. I'm glad that you have different spaces that you can carve out for yourself where you can do that.
Yeah, very fortunate. I feel very privileged to have the space that I do.
Yeah, I'm glad. You mentioned, using painting as part of that. Can you share a bit about how I know painting is still new for you, or fairly new. Can you share a bit or a lot about how you started painting and how that is part of like your self-care now?
So last year, I think it was about this time last year, the idea popped into my head. I think I saw somebody on YouTube or Instagram painting, and I was like, oh, that might be interesting. Aside from, the requisite high school art class,
Mhm.
Art One or whatever it was called, I was never really artistic in an aesthetic type of way. I have a degree in English literature with a gender studies minor, so my art has always been through literary creations.
Mhm.
So writing short stories or even nonfiction type expositions. Yeah. So last spring, I was like, huh, could be interesting. I went to work that night. I brought it up to somebody, and then they were like, oh, I have an easel for you. So that night, they brought the easel to work. I work at a bar. They brought the easel in, and I just went to town. I went to the art store in downtown Boise and picked up some basic supplies, the colors that I thought might look good together, and I started playing,
Mhm.
and it was very very cathartic. It coincided with a 6 month sobriety stint that I did last year.
Mhm.
After I got COVID last January, and right after I recovered, I quit drinking, I quit smoking, for 6 months straight, and I started painting right in that interim, and I just found that the creative output had intensified so greatly with that sobriety. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mentioned it was cathartic. I was able to pull something out of my subconscious that I didn't know was there, and it was in a much more figurative form than most of the other artistic expressions that I've engaged with prior.
Yeah, I get that. Like what is the word that people use? Grok? I grok that. I
Yeah,
don't know if people still say that. I don't go out much. But like that resonates with me too. I was an English and reading teacher and a poet, and I've been writing poetry since I was a little kid. And I'm saying like using writing poetry loosely, it was really
right.
bad when I was little. Of course, I was a child, right? But like it was meaningful to me as a young person to put words on paper. I started getting migraine headaches when I was 28,
Mhm.
and writing became has become more difficult as I've progressed with a
Sure.
neurological condition. Like finding words and phrases to express certain things in a specific way can be really hard when you're fussy about words.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a poem about blank spaces, and like you can't keep a dictionary of like words you've forgotten, like you can't document what you've forgotten, but being able
Right.
to like turn that into something poetic when you don't have the words to make it resonate with other people the way that it feels for myself or for oneself is super frustrating. And so to get around that, I started painting. or I
certainly.
intensified my painting practice
That makes
because I
sense.
still
Yeah.
had those feelings and that frustration and that need to express myself.
Mm.
I've been told my whole life that I'm very dramatic, and the universal they are
The
not wrong.
proverbial they
Yeah, they are not wrong. I have a lot of big feelings, and I have to do something with them to be okay.
I can relate to that as well. Absolutely.
And so I had to kind of transition from writing into painting, but text still finds its way into my art because
Mm.
that's where I started. But like you said about finding a thing inside your psyche or something like your subconscious that you didn't know was there, and now it's on a canvas. I look at things I've painted and I'm like, did I do that?
I know, and I
Like I
I've
made that?
used to feel that, and I suppose I still do feel that about things that I've written. You go back
I
and
do
read
that.
something.
Yeah, yep. I do
That,
that when I write too. Like I wrote that because especially
yeah.
now when I look back at poems I wrote, but when I was more well
Mhm.
than I am now. I'm like, I don't know if I could do that again.
Well, I think that's the beauty of art and the spontaneity of art anyway is that even if whether it's writing or painting or drawing, et cetera, the person who created that image, that piece, that essay, whatever it may be, that person is gone, right? Like, so the person that wrote that thing or created that painting in that moment no longer exists because now you've transcended that point in time. And so
That is so true.
all of your experiences that led you up to that piece, which whatever it may be, it stops there, right?
Yeah, like I couldn't paint what I painted last year because I'm a different person this year.
Right,
Like
for sure.
who I was then is not who I am now. Yep.
And I think that's analogous of just about everything in life. Life itself, we walk through relationships. The person that I was in, my last romantic relationship is not going to be the same person that I will be in my current or future, romantic relationship or encounters.
That's really important, I think. Um I was married.
Mm,
I shouldn't laugh. Because it was a serious thing, right?
yeah.
The reason I laugh is I've been divorced almost 10 years,
Mm,
which was twice as long as I was married.
right.
And people who didn't know me then, when they find out I was married, are very surprised. They're like, "You were married," they're like, "to a guy? For
Right.
when? And, like, for how long?" And, like,
Yeah.
"Really?" Like, and my parents my mom mostly, because she's the nosy one, she still asks me it's been 10 years since I got divorced. She still asks me, like, "Were you happy? Did you like him? Do you wish you hadn't married him?" I said, "Mom, that was so long ago. Like, I'm not even that person anymore."
Yeah.
Like, and
Why is
neither
that
is
relevant?
he.
Yeah.
And right. Well, it's relevant because I live with my parents and my mom only has a limited number of things she can talk about.
Certainly. Gotcha.
Yeah, which is fine. Like, I knew that's what was gonna happen when I moved back in with my parents. That's the kinda relationship my mom has with people.
Yeah.
Um, but, like, my ex-husband isn't that person either.
Right.
So, like, I can't stay mad at him for things that happened 15 years ago. Like, it
Yeah.
hurt me then. I am no longer that person. Like, we are not
True.
those people. We have moved on. We learned from it, I hope. I hope he's
Yeah.
thriving. I'm sure he's thriving more now than he was when we were married.
Certainly. And but at the same time, there's no need to dwell on much of that passing.
Right, exactly, and that's what I tell my mom too. I'm like, "I'm not gonna dwell on it." Like, there's
Yeah.
no point in like, "Wow, I know you wanna talk about it because it's, like, a frame of reference that we share." I said, "But, like, we can talk about other things that have
Right.
happened since
Right.
then. I don't wanna rehash everything that I've done ever in my life."
Mm.
So, you mentioned, like, that first painting you did. You were like, "Wow, I this came out of me. This is really cool." So, you obviously kept doing it, and it's been about a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many
So
do you know about how many you've done? Like, have you been are you hoarding them? Do you have, like, a library of paintings? Have you been selling them? Have you put them in a gallery?
I would venture to guess that I have probably created anywhere between 25 and 30 like solid pieces that I've completed.
Mhm, and they're sizable canvases. I've seen them
Yeah, yeah. Some of them are pretty
Instagram.
large.
Some of them are big.
I just finished a pretty small one yesterday. That was pretty nice.
Cool.
But yeah, within the first. Let's say within the first 6 months, I sold like nine pieces.
Great.
So straight off the bat, I mean, I was selling work just based off of word of mouth and Instagram, et cetera, and that felt
Hmm.
really nice. That was very validating and affirming. But it was also a surprise because I didn't engage with creating to be sellable to market myself. And in the last couple months, I've been doing a little more of that.
Hmm.
I know you've seen some of that online. For me, it was just about expression.
Yep.
It was just about expression, about getting something out, about taking the time to shed the distractions for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long, I sit in my studio and paint or handle the material, handle the medium.
Hmm.
But honestly, a lot of my paintings just go up around my house.
Yeah. Yep.
It seems so bizarre and so, oh, superfluous to like the point, I suppose. But there are some things that I've created that I really enjoy looking at.
Oh, you should absolutely love what you painted. I think it's great that they're up in your house.
And
You made a thing that you love.
right.
I think that's so much better than being a self-critical artist.
Yeah, I'm not creating things to be appealing to somebody else. I want to create art that I would want to view myself, that I would want to hang in my house, and as a result of that, I often do.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, I think so many artists go through the like, "Oh, I'm terrible. I'm not like I don't like what I'm doing. This could be so much better."
Yeah, but that's
Or those of us who are trying to market, right? I hate marketing. It's like my
right.
least favorite part of everything I do is like trying to get people to look at my stuff. Um is like the people say, "Oh, you have to find your niche. You have to like who's your ideal customer?" Like and all the stuff we're supposed to, in quote
Mm,
fingers, we're supposed to do to appeal to an audience. And it's like, what if I just make art that I like and then other weirdos like me decide
yeah.
that they like it too and then they buy it or they
Yeah,
don't,
exactly. And I
which isn't the greatest marketing strategy when you're depending on your art for your income, but
certainly,
well, but
and
like art should be about what, I make what I love and then other people love it too. If there's social commentary woven in there, good for us.
sure,
Because
right.
there usually is with mine,
I've
even if
noticed.
it's weird.
I have certainly romanticized the idea of being a full-time artist or a full-time writer, novelist, et cetera, et cetera. It's just in the same vein that I really enjoy cooking. I can't imagine being a professional chef because the rigor, and I
Yeah.
mean, I'm certain that it is very fulfilling for so many people. Yet at the same time, I know a lot of chefs who work in the service industry here in Boise, and they seem so exhausted and so tired frequently. And it seems to me like the joy of the arts that surrounds it is sort of robbed by the rigor.
That's really what happened to me with education. I
Hmm.
love teaching. I love
Yeah,
kids. It was just the joy got sucked out of it to the point where I experienced severe burnout and a medical crisis.
yeah,
Like I think that that's a really excellent observation about turning anything into like when your hobby becomes your side hustle, becomes your full-time gig. I think the
certainly.
problem is capitalism destroys everything. It kills everything we love. You
Yeah, no, it really does. And I do hope that someday I'll be able to rely more fully on my artistic creations.
Mhm.
Yet I'm not in a rush. I created a website. I have a pretty solid social media foundation right now, which is it's just started, but it's growing. And if that day ever comes, great. But I'm not looking to be hip to all the latest trends in SEO and B2B marketing. Like I don't
Yeah.
care.
The letters SEO make my eyes cross. Like, ugh. Yeah, it's not my favorite.
Yeah,
Like I look at analytics and stats as just like, "Oh, look, it's a number." Like
sure, right,
and then I put it away. Like I can't obsess over it. It's
yeah,
just ugh. I prefer to obsess over paint pigments and like ASMR paint mulling videos. Like
Perfect.
that I'm if I'm gonna obsess about anything related to my art, it's gonna be like the actual art making process. It's not gonna
Yeah,
be the business end of it. I'll find someone to do that for me.
certainly. And I just derive so much joy from the process of creating, and I really feel like if I turn that into a business too soon, I'll be extremely unhappy with the outcome. And so, to that effect, like I mentioned, I create art that I would want to view. My website
Mhm.
is a website that I would want to navigate because it's
Yes.
mine. And
Yep.
we get to step back at a certain point and make those self-serving, selfish decisions when we want to, especially with for things like that. And I spent a lot of time not listening to what I wanted, or it feels really nice to be able to own something creatively.
Yeah, absolutely. And that joy is so important. There's not enough of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about like how people always look forward to retirement because then they can do the stuff on their bucket list, or then they can travel, or then they can do whatever. And it's like, do it now. Like, do the
Yeah.
things
Right.
that we love and want to do now. But I mean, you did mention before, it is a privilege that we get to create art now in our young. I don't know how old you are, but like I'm 38. I'm not at retirement age. I'm not an old
Right.
person, but I did leave the traditional employment world
Mm,
early due to illness reasons. But like being sick isn't a privilege. Being able to say I'm too like being able to actually walk away from work was the privilege. And being able to like slow down and experience joy and be intentional was definitely a privilege. And being able to be here for my parents' elder years is great
certainly. Yeah.
most of the time. Like I said, my mom's a little nosy, but I
Yeah.
knew what I was getting into.
I'm 35. I feel very privileged to have a steady couple jobs that I enjoy showing up to, though I'm very ready to get out of the service industry nightlife scene. But I have a great house with reasonable rent. A lot of space. I've got 5 bedrooms, 2 baths on half an acre, and my rent is
Oh,
reasonable.
nice. Yeah, that's great.
That I can pay it by myself, which is it's an excessive amount of space, but that's the product of a ended relationship. Um, but I don't have children intentionally, so I won't have children. I made that decision long ago. Uh, Vasectomies are amazing. I just have to put that out there.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Birth control is one of the, like, hormonal birth control. A little tangent here is one of the most horrible things to put somebody's body through, and that simple choice for me not only solidified my desire to not be a parent, my want to not father children, and it's cheaper, honestly, in the long run,
Yeah.
both on financially and money wise. But all that to say, I am very privileged to have certain amenities in my life that allow me to paint 48 by 48 canvases or
Mhm.
larger, or to paint a room studio white so that I can view my art in a untainted environment, things like that.
Yeah, I my studio is like moss not moss green, like dark sage green, which makes it a little tough, but
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to paint that room. It's fine. Yeah, I always a little moment of vulnerability for me. I always wanted kids and it didn't work out.
Mhm.
Um, but I love being an auntie and I'm a godmother and like there's other ways for me to exercise those mothering, nurturing, parenting skills that I have. And
Certainly.
I worked as a teacher for a long time and I still have those skills and capacities. And so, yeah, I don't have kids of
Yeah.
my own, but that ended up, I think, working out okay because I also now don't have any energy to do anything ever. And that would be really difficult if I had children.
Certainly. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that when you started painting, it coincided with like a brief period or a 6-month period where you were sober. And I know recently you posted something on Instagram about doing that again. Is that something that you're willing to talk about a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, they're no off topic subjects for me. So
So I just as a little background, and I like talking about it because it overlaps with me a little bit, so it's
Mhm.
something we can have a conversation on. I've been sober since 2018, but I had actually been doing 12 step for 5 years before that.
Yeah.
So, like, I'd been going to a 12-step group for something other than alcohol, and then in 2018, I was like, "Hey, maybe I should stop drinking too." Um, and it was a good decision. All my medication works so much better when I'm not drinking alcohol, imagine that.
Yeah.
Um, and 2018 was also when I first started painting. So there's like, oh, when you
It's funny how
stop
that
numbing
happens.
yourself, you have to do something with your feelings.
Right.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I don't all my negative coping skills I've gotten rid of. So now I have to do something and it's hard. So what made you decide, I guess, to do you said you're 30 days sober this time?
Yeah, so
That's what that I guess last time I checked it was on or saw it was on Instagram, and at that point it was 30 days.
yeah, and that was just a few days ago, so it's a little over a month now.
Cool.
Yeah, this time around, I work at a bar, like I mentioned. You know, alcohol is very accessible. It's very easy. It's very
Yeah.
cheap for me. Cheap,
Well,
if
and
not
I lived in
free.
Idaho for
Right.
for a number of years, and I know the culture there is either you're LDS or you drink a lot. It tends to be.
Right.
At least that's what it seemed
Yeah.
like to me,
Yeah, I know. I
which
mean,
I
I make
grew
a
up in North Dakota, which is regularly the binge drinking,
for sure.
like the highest binge drinking state in the country. So I'm aware.
I make a living off of the fact that that is something that people do.
Yep.
I mean, I mentioned I went through a pretty pretty rough breakup, separation involving an open relationship and everything in between. It was a nightmare situation. But throughout the last year, well, I guess since my last sober stint, I found that I was utilizing alcohol as a or a means of escape,
Mhm.
and it wasn't really. I don't believe that I demonstrated any elements of dependency on alcohol. Certainly, like build up your tolerance and hangovers kind of are just kind of a constant thing. But
Yeah.
it was the activity that I did. I would always go to the bar that I work because it's cheap for me and have a beer or a cocktail and read a book, or have a beer and
Mhm.
cocktail and catch up with a friend, or have a cocktail and catch up on returning emails, or
Mhm.
so not only was I drinking when I felt like there was something to celebrate, or like I was bummed out, or I had a rough day. It just happened to be ancillary to everything else that I did. And my emotional state in the last several months certainly necessitated me taking a closer look at the activities that were helping or hindering my very survival, because I found myself drinking more than I was eating, for example, or
Mhm.
sacrificing sleep to drinking. And I woke up one day and I was like, well, that's enough. Enough's enough. So a little over a month ago, I just stopped. There was no real lead up to it. I kind of thought about it for a couple days beforehand, but just stopped. And the first couple days, it's like, especially when you work in that scene, when you're surrounded by the inebriant, um,
Mhm.
there is a little pressure to kind of slip, or oh, maybe one's okay, whatever. But I truly think that my body has thanked me, and it's again, I don't think that I'm maybe medically. Doctors might have something to say about it, but I don't think that I fall into the what we consider to be as like an alcoholic category.
Mhm.
Um, and I believe that there are so many other reasons aside from alcoholism to quit drinking or quit using a substance or quit a certain behavior or habit.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what when I quit drinking, like, I don't think I was at the point of dependency either, but I made really bad choices when I was drinking.
Right.
If I, like, traced all my bad choices back to their origin point, at least 80% of them started in the bar.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. And I I have migraine disease,
Mhm.
and major depressive disorder, and both of those medications operate on the brain, and I shouldn't drink when I'm on them.
Right.
And I have a lot of sensitivities to foods and apparently to fermented things.
Oh wow.
And I was down to like only two adult beverages that I could drink without getting instantly sick. And I was like, I'm putting way too much effort into like trying to maintain some kind of social drinking habit
Yeah.
while ill. Why is it so important to me to find like the drink I can still have? Why is it important for me to have a drink while I grade essays?
Right. Exactly.
Why is this a thing? And it turns out I can't have fermented things.
Yeah.
Like not even fermented foods. Like I
Wow.
can't have kombucha, I can't have sauerkraut. Like all of those things make me sick.
All of those awesome things.
All of those awesome things that I
I'm
love.
so sorry.
Yeah. Like, and I used to make my own kefir or kefir, however I've heard it
Yeah.
pronounced both
Yeah.
ways. I used to like make my own and then like press cheese from it and use it for buttermilk biscuits and things like that. I can't make sourdough pancakes anymore. None of
Oh
those things. None of
no.
those things. All off the table. And here I was like clinging to white wine and like
White
44 North
Claws.
vodka. Like, and you know
Right.
what? I can't have potatoes either. And so
What?
like I was thinking that gluten-free vodka was like the thing and here that's made with potatoes and I can't have potatoes
Yeah.
either. So like I
Yeah.
was just making myself sicker this whole time.
Well, and that's really the thing. There is a, even at a base level, whether you think that you can have a couple beers, on the weekend or not, there is, your body is processing a toxin. Don't get me wrong. I love spirits. I love beer. I had a non-alcoholic beer yesterday. Like I do find ways around that because I do enjoy those things. But alcohol is the only state and Fed sanctioned drug that is acceptable, but it's the only drug that is socially acceptable to do in public
Mhm.
today. And so there's not the stigma on the front end because the bottle of booze that you pick up or that you're served from at the bar has a tax stamp on it. Every single one.
Yeah, it does. That's true.
So not only are you paying for it in that way, but since I quit drinking, I sleep a lot better. I'm a lot more clear-headed. I make much sounder decisions. I'm able to provide for myself. My appetite has returned tremendously. I've put on weight, which is always been a big struggle for me, being underweight. You talk about things like allergies to certain things. I truly believe that I'm allergic to the consistent quantity of alcohol that was in my system. Like my skin, I have been having issues with eczema.
I have eczema too. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's chronic inflammatory condition. Yeah.
yeah. And alcohol does not help that. And in fact, it exacerbates it to the point where it's painful for me. And so since I've stopped drinking again, my skin's cleared up. I feel healthier. I'm sleeping more soundly. Because there's also an interesting thing that happens with the sugars from alcohol, whatever type you imbibe in, as they metabolize as you sleep, it actually wakes you up between 2 and 4 hours after you've gone to sleep. So there's a reason why when you go out drinking, you likely wake up in the middle of the night confused as to why.
I never thought of that. Like the metabolism part. That makes sense.
Yeah. So all these things, I find that I have more time to do things. I also have a lot more money because I'm not pouring it down my throat every
It's
day.
so expensive. I found okay, so I was out shopping for Christmas and I found alcohol-free spirits and I was
Mm,
like, I really miss the taste of gin. I liked
yeah,
gin. And
yeah,
I know a lot of people are like, "Ew, it's like Christmas trees." And I'm like, "I know, isn't it great?" And I was like, "Oh, they have alcohol-free gin."
yeah,
I was like, "That sounds great." And I was like, "No. That sounds like a bad idea because it costs money." And
exactly.
the last thing I need to do is to become a snob of alcohol-free spirits
Alcohol-free spirit.
and alcohol-free beer. Like, because I was such a microbrewery snob and I was
Yeah.
like just a craft brew bitch. And I was like, I don't need to be doing that with like non-alcoholic versions. I can't afford that. Like what?
Yeah.
No, put down the bottle. And I did not look back. And I probably saved a whole lot of money because I did not buy it.
Right.
Because then I would be like, oh, well, like my dad doesn't drink anymore because it makes him too sleepy on his meds, but he used to like whiskey and Coke. Well, they have this alcohol free whiskey. So I asked him about it and he's like, oh, I had whiskey Cokes in college because it was alcohol. He's like, I don't
Right.
really drink that as like a grown ass adult. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm glad I didn't get the whiskey because
Yeah.
like that was 50 years ago.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I as a bartender, I started just drinking vodka, shooting vodka, because it's, when you're on the job and you're allowed to drink, that's the easiest thing and the most palatable thing that doesn't wreck your stomach and ruin your life while you're working.
Yeah. Yep.
um, I don't miss shots of vodka. I don't miss having a Tito's and soda after work. What I miss is sitting in my backyard drinking a beer. I miss that
Yeah.
process. There's something that's nostalgic about that for me. But for with non-alcoholic beer, for example, I feel like it's the spirit and the essence is there. But when you pick up a six pack, your objective is to finish the six pack, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find that when I'm drinking non-alcoholic beer, I'm not counting how many I have left anymore.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, "Wow, this is pretty tasty. I'm enjoying myself with this beverage." Yeah. Which is why I started drinking. But, like, isn't what it became, that's not how it ended.
Yeah,
So,
what was the most difficult part of like quitting drinking for you? If you don't mind me asking.
oh, the most difficult part? All my friends still drink,
Yeah.
but I quit drinking briefly in college, and it was much harder then. And the way I got around that was I always showed up at a party with, cheese and crackers that I'd carry around so no one could hand me a drink. Like, I
That's
would just carry around a box of crackers and, like, a thing of
genius.
those, like, cheese spreads,
Right.
and that's what I would have at a party instead of drinking, is I would just walk around with my own food. Because I don't like to be rude, and I'm a very social drinker, and so if
Right.
somebody hands me something, I feel bad saying no.
Right. You feel obligated.
Like,
Yeah.
I have way stronger boundaries now in my 30s than I did at 19. So, it was easier as an adult,
Hmm.
or as, like, a more grown-up adult to say, "No, I'm not gonna drink," and my friends were pretty understanding about it. Really, the final thing that ultimately made me decide, I lost a family member to complications from alcoholism
Right.
that same year, and that actually made any of the hard things about quitting much easier because my cousin passed away when he tried to get sober and detoxed unsupervised. He got
Oh
very
wow.
ill, and
Yeah.
then there was a very long process of him getting progressively sicker in the hospital while trying to recover.
Right.
And it was just really devastating for our family. And so that really honestly made the hard parts pretty easy. Like, no, that was bad. We're not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I certainly think that, and I'm so sorry to hear about your cousin.
Thank you.
But yeah, there's definitely a point where you have those moments of realization or clarity where it's like, well, I see how this could go.
Mhm.
And with my history with depression, and I've had a voluntary commitment to a mental health institution in my past, I could
Mhm.
see how it would take just a severe life event to push me off that edge,
Yeah. Yep.
and recognizing that I don't know how long I plan on this stint of sobriety being this time. I'm very, very comfortable in it right now, and I really don't feel any pressure to start drinking at this point in time. The nicer weather kind of screws that up a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, I was not handling my emotions well in the last several months, and on top of that, I just wasn't creating. I over the last year, between the period between the last 6 months stint of sobriety and now, I hardly created.
Mhm.
I don't think that I can be an artist and be a drinker at the same time.
That's interesting. When people ask, "Why do you paint?" Well, I have to. Like, I can't
Right,
not create. I have to exercise my demons because I can't exorcise them.
right.
So, like, the option is you either knock them out with substances or you, like, work them out through creative process, one or the other. We just have to do what we can with them and try to coexist peacefully, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that staring those quote unquote demons in the face and working with them, working alongside them. I think that's
Yeah.
where a lot of really profound magic happens artistically. And I mean, whatever your artistic medium is. Like for writing, for example, I can drink and write all day long. Some of the greatest stories I've created have been the product of me sitting down with copious amounts of whiskey.
I think Stephen King doesn't even remember writing, is it Cujo?
Oh, yeah, that
Because he
doesn't
was
surprise
like
me.
so drunk and on whatever drugs, like the whole time he wrote it.
Yeah.
But like has been in recovery for a long time too, because he was like, I was killing myself. I mean, it's not an uncommon phenomenon among writers and artists
Oh,
to deal
yeah.
with substance abuse.
My dad,
So,
who is also an educator, he looked over at me at dinner one time and he said something to the effect of, "I think I figured out why you drink." And I was like, "Oh yeah, why? What's that?" I was very intrigued, of course.
mhm,
And he goes, "It's so you can deal with all of us." And he didn't mean family; he just meant the world at large. I'm a very introverted person, and I am forced to be in extroverted scenarios and territory all the time, like we
mhm,
most of us are. I can't bartend without being slightly friendly and
mhm,
and personable and a little bit gregarious, but I certainly think that substances can be used or are used frequently to mask something else, to mask what's going on internally with us. Like, do I miss drinking? Sure. Drinking on a patio on a Sunday afternoon sounds really, really great, but I think I'm happier. I think I'm much happier when I don't drink. I think I'm more in touch with myself. I think I'm more in tune with the world around me. I feel like I'm more present for my dogs, for example.
mhm,
I'm also grateful for the means and the ability to find sobriety, even if they are shorter periods or however long I choose to do it, with the support and not experiencing withdrawals. There's alcoholism in my family, and I don't feel like I struggle with the pull to alcohol as
mhm.
those individuals do. Plus, I'm a lot friendlier.
Well, thank you for talking with me today. I really appreciate the time you took to share about all the things today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hoof. To view the complete show notes and all the links mentioned in today's episode, or to get a full transcript of the episode, visit hoorfpodcast.com. That's HOORF podcast.com. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they're released. And if you're enjoying our podcast, I'd love to have you leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. Reviews are one of the major ways that Apple ranks their podcasts, so even though it only takes you a few seconds, it really does make a difference for us. Become a patron. For $3 a month, you can support the creation of this podcast, pay my editor, and join a community of fellow caregivers out here just doing our best. Thank you again for joining me, Elle Billing, in this episode of Hoof. Until next time, be excellent to each other. Hoof is hosted by Elle Billing at Elle and Wink. Audio editing by Ricky Cummings at Ricky Poo. Music composed by Ricky Cummings. Hoof is a production of Elle and Wink Art Studio, all rights reserved. Hoof Podcast can be found on social media channels at Hoof Podcast, at HOORF Podcast.